Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, April 3rd, Good Friday, April 3rd, actually. So it is a holiday here for us in Ontario, Canada, and for many, obviously, around the world. So I thought I would take this opportunity to talk about one of, if not the most asked questions about the Camino and when it pertains to walking the Camino. And that is, of course, what type of shoes should I wear? And you'll notice that I said shoes because I've experience with shoes. I'm not a big fan of the hiking boots. I know that they've worked for some for a countless number of years. Remember those clunky ones with the red laces? They work, and some people prefer them. And there's other variations of hiking shoes. Even now, your popular brands like Hoka and Ultra, they make a hiking shoe, if you will. So, I mean, that works for some. For me personally, I went with the Trail Runner because I just felt that that was a better fit. I did a lot of research on it and wanted to impart some of that research to you who might be interested in learning what is, the proper or what would be a great shoe to wear on the Camino Francés, that is. That's what I have experience with, and I know there's a lot of up and down. There's a lot of road, cobblestone, gravel, jagged rock, shale, mud, water, you name it. Every kind of condition can be found walking the Camino Francés. Now, also remember, this is my opinion. So I'm just giving you what worked for me, what I noticed worked for others, what I've seen by and large on a lot of the Facebook groups and people talking about in terms of what shoes work for them. My ultimate strongly suggested shoe that I think a lot of people should maybe try out and potentially wear is solely based on my opinion. And it is one that, comes with some pros and cons to it for, folks that may or may not take to it. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to start with a different shoe right off the bat, simply because I just came back from a 10K walk with my wife. Like I said, it's Good Friday. It's beautiful weather. It's 22 degrees here. And we decided to go for ice cream. If we're going to go for ice cream and we're going to put on those extra calories, then might as well make it worth it. So we walked from close to our home about 5 to 6K to a really popular downtown ice cream shop district here in London, and then walked back, and we put in our steps and we put in our time, and it was great. And I put these next shoes through their paces, where I've been primarily using them for indoor throughout the winter on indoor tracks for walking, and that's what I bought them for. But I thought I would try them out on simple, paved path and see how they take me. All right, so let's dig into that. Okay, so I went with the Hoka Clifton 10. It's a very popular shoe. Clifton 10 there on the back is a little worn in. This is what I was using for, like I said, indoor walking tracks. It's got a lot of cushion. What I thought was going to be a 5mm drop ended up being an 8mm drop when I recently looked up this shoe. And you'll figure out why that's kind of important compared to the shoes that I wore in the Camino, the Altra Olympus. And that being a 0 drop is something completely in a different realm. And if you're not sure what drop means, quite simply, it's, if it's a 0 drop, the ball of your foot and your heel are striking the ground at an even pace or even level, if you will. Whereas a heel drop itself would be a little taller in the shoe. So it makes a lot of difference, when you're talking about millimeters, degrees, however you want to put it, from anywhere from a 0 on up to a 8, 10, 12, and the cushioning that goes along with it. So, like I said, I got these Clifton 10s for indoor walking throughout the winter. Noticed right away that they were highly cushioned, which is not a bad thing. I just felt a little tall in the shoe, if I'm being honest. I also noticed that, I was slipping a bit in the back. And to alleviate that, what I did was the heel lock. And if you're not sure about the heel lock, I got a little video that I'll pop up there to show you, but I'm also going to kind of demonstrate here, is that you kind of do a loop in and around the eyelet, the top eyelet of your shoelace, and you cross the other side into that so that you can pull that pretty tight. I don't know if you guys can see that there. And what that does is a proper heel lock adding around to here. So you're not getting a lot of slippage with your foot inside, and you don't want slippage when it comes to, days of walking, your feet heating up, swelling within the shoe, and potential blisters, because if you're rubbing in the back there, it's a good area for a hot spot. And speaking of hot spots, I wore these, like I said, for 10K, And when I got home, I felt a little hot spot on the left side. To give you an idea, and this, we'll talk about socks in a whole different episode. There's so many different types and whatnot. So this is exactly what I wore. These are smart wool. Smart wool have a degree or a blend of merino wool in them. And this sock is what I wore for the walk that I just went on. It's the hiking. They have run, they have thinner ones, they have cushion, non-cushion, men's, ladies. And these actual pair is what I wore on my first Camino. So they've been kind of through the ringer, but they're doing quite well. And they are comparable to what a lot of folks that I know use are Darn Tough is another brand. And I think Darn Tough has a lifetime guarantee, whereas these don't. I've put a lot of them through their paces. It's all I wear. And, I've had a few with holes, so maybe Smart Wool, if you happen to see this, help me out. But yeah, these were the socks that I wore. And, with some rub and maybe with some sliding in the Hoka, I was finding a bit of a hot spot as I was getting to the 8-9 kilometer mark. And not great. It can be alleviated with when you're out there on the Camino by, taking breaks, taking your shoes off, switching out your socks if you're able to. And if it's really bad, slapping on a Compede just in that particular area because you don't want to develop a blister. That could be a day killer. I've seen in some cases where people's blisters have been so bad that it's ended Caminos, and it's certainly not something that you want. But that's it on the Clifton 10 Hoka. I've had experience with several pairs of Hoka shoes. I know people that have worn the Speed Goat Trail Runner, which is a very popular one. Tried it on, just wasn't my style, wasn't my cup of tea. I wish it was, because they got some great colorways, some awesome colors to them, but just didn't work out for me. And speaking of Hoka, what'll come up later in this video is my what do you call them, downtime shoe, or my slides anyway, that I would use when I was kind of in the evening, just kicking around, and you wanted to have something that was versatile, that you're not wearing your travel shoes, and you're not wearing shower sandals, if you will, but this is just walk around town. Potentially they're great for cooling off in the water, but I'll talk more on that later. Okay, so next we've got the Altra Lone Peak. This one is the Lone Peak, I want to say 7, I think it is. Yes, Lone Peak 7. So very popular shoe for the Camino. Reason being is it's got, crazy lugs here. I didn't bother to show the Hoka simply because it's not a shoe that I would use, for walking the Camino. I wouldn't recommend that one unless it was the Speed Goat, if that's your thing. Speed Goat's got crazy lugs on here too, meaning that it digs into the gravel and the dirt and the mud when you need it to, which is helpful because there are some slippery spots in terms of when rock or shale or some of the even Roman roads get, or cobblestone get pretty slippery. You want to make sure that you have traction. These Lone Peaks, I've had several pairs of Lone Peaks. I've had going back to, I want to say, the 5 or 6. I trained for my initial Camino in them. And I also got used to wearing now this shoe has a 0 drop. Remember how I said the Clifton has a 8mm drop? This is a 0. And the reason why I decided to try the Ultra, and I'll see if I can link it here in the video, is there was, I had concern because before I started and when I was training, back for my Camino in 2022, I had a bout of plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis, if you're not fully aware, and I'm not too medical as far as that goes, but it is a strain in the muscle in the under fascia of your foot. And, for that matter, it is, you're relying on a lot of your foot to do the movement, I think. I'll see if I can, throw up a bit of a diagram or whatnot while this is playing here. But long story short, I would get out of bed in the mornings after having a sleep, and it would take a bit to get my foot moving, because it had some pain in that arch area. I have high arches as well. So, to that end, it'd be a tennis ball, or, kind of massaging it and getting it going in the morning would be something of a feat in itself. Sorry, pardon the pun. But with that, I had looked up, on YouTube, what would be a great shoe for somebody experiencing plantar fasciitis. And lo and behold, I found, and I'll try and find this video of a trail runner, that this gentleman who had tried a number of shoes, and he had experienced plantar fasciitis. And so what he was looking at was a shoe that would help him out, or at least not cause a burden to his plantar fasciitis. And he said it all but cured him of it, which is pretty remarkable. So I was like, okay, let's check this out. So one of the things that I was told, incidentally from, the shoe stores where I did a lot of research, is right behind me here. This is Backroads here in London. big tip is find yourself a reputable shoe store, not just one of the big box stores. I mean, I'm sure they'll have them. There'll be places that have some of these brands in other shops, but someone who actually deals in this stuff for serious runners, that are pretty hardcore, or people that are looking for these type of shoes for this type of activity. They know what they're talking about. The people that work there typically are very knowledgeable in this sort of thing. Actually, there's a lady here that has walked a couple Caminos, so we talk all the time. So, where was I? Oh yes. So going back to that, this Ultra shoe being a zero drop, it is something to get used to compared to, say, you're coming off a shoe that is 5 millimeters or 8 millimeters. If you're not used to that, you could do some damage to your feet. And that being the case, they recommend moving in and out of the shoe. So taking this out for, say, a 3K or a 5K, and then switching back to your other shoes for a couple of days, and and on until you've weaned yourself off your old and into your new. And that's exactly what I did. So with my first round of Ultra shoes, and I was working on my feet at the time, selling motorcycles, and I was on the go quite a bit. And so for my walking, I was using Altra Lone Peaks. And then they became so comfortable and they were working so well as getting rid of that plantar fasciitis that I incorporated them into my day-to-day. And before you know it, I worked, instead of just working in that shoe for the Camino, I worked myself out of that pair. Then got myself into another pair of Lone Peaks. And then lo and behold, I don't know, for whatever reason, I thought I needed some more cushioning, because if you'll see, there's the sole, as far as the stack, it's not crazy. And the shoe that I'm going to show you, the shoe that I actually wore, again, by Ultra, has, a much better heel cup, if you will, and gave much more cushioning. But I panicked with 2 weeks to go and switched out of these to the Altra Olympus 5s. Thank goodness I did, because it was the best shoe ever, and I'm going to be using it again on my Portuguese Camino. And, that's kind of where I went. So I broke them in really quickly, then went on the trip and did wonderful with them. So there you have it. The Altra Lone Peak, great shoe. I see it on the Camino all the time. I see a lot of videos where people are wearing them. You've got, space for gaiters and that you can hook in if that's what you want. And the other big part of this too is a huge toe box, right? So you can see that it's got a lot of space. So basically your toes aren't kind of cramped up. You're kind of just more of a natural stance. And that's kind of what the 0 degree or 0 millimeter drop is too, a natural footfall. And so because of the large toe box, you're getting ultra comfort. And so the only drawback with these is I happen to find them on sale at, sorry, Backroads, not this store, but, and they were at 11. Now the ones I wore in Spain were an 11.5. And usually a half size is good to give you some space to allow your feet to swell, which they will, if you're on a 30K day. And so you're not crowded and you're not, leaving room for blisters or whatnot. So I'll get back into these and start training with them again. I'm just a little concerned for the fact that they're a half size smaller, when ultimately I'm going to go with what I know in the 11.5 Olympus. Anyway, on to the next shoe. But before I do that, apologies for the sunglasses. It's just super bright out here today. Sunglasses are going to be another topic that I'm going to talk about. I've tried out many different kinds. These I found in REI, if luck would have it, on our last trip to Buffalo, and happened to see them in there. And I thought, maybe, I didn't buy them then, but I thought maybe they're on Amazon or somewhere else for a little cheaper, because they were just, I just bought some Ray-Bans. So lo and behold, I checked them out, found them on Amazon, the exact same pair, love them, probably going to take them. They're great polarizing lenses. Can't remember the name for the life of me right now, but I will post it up. But yeah, sunglasses will probably be a separate video that I'll put together as well. On to the next shoe. Okay, so without further ado, this is my strong suggestion shoe. This is the one that got me through training prior to the Camino, over 850 kilometers on the Camino, and is now graduated to my everyday lawn care kind of shoe. So don't mind how battered and bruised they look. But funny note in that one of my Camino buddies, Steve, if you happen to see this, Steve, shout out. And maybe you can chime in the comments below. Steve was having, poor guy, he was having some issues with his knee, and I think maybe a couple blisters, but he started out with one pair of shoes at the beginning, knee pain, whatnot, and switched to another, only got worse. And then when we finally got to Leon, which is typically where you do rest day, he shopped and, he went and bought the same shoe that I wore. And for the rest of the Camino. And from what I understand, no problems. Knee felt better, not 100%, but enough room, no blisters, and he finished out the Camino like a champ. So Steve, if you're watching, love to know, because I know that Steve's gone and done the Camino Francés last year with his new wife. Congratulations, guys. And I'd love to know if you used the same shoes, went with a new pair of the Ultras, what your wife wore. I would love to know in the comments, if you happen to see this, which way you guys went in terms of footwear. So here is the Olympus. This is the Altra Olympus. This was the 5, I want to say. And it is in the worst for wear. Yeah, so I mean, you'll see, much like the lugs that I showed you in the other, on the Lone Peaks, these are basically shorn right down, but I put them through their paces. You'll see up here, they've got a little ringlet for gaiters, if you wanted to use that. A note about gaiters, I mean, I didn't use them, but what would happen is I saw people with them, just the really short gaiters. Gaiters, if you don't know, are something that would be cling up to the ankle above here and hook down in the back, and basically in the front, and cover this area so you don't get rocks and dirt in there. I mean, every now and again, I kicked off my shoes anyway at a place where we would have, our cafe con leche, or, have our lunch or second breakfast or whatnot. And I would just empty out the shoe, and kind of go from that. But gaiters are an option if that's what you're into. So this was, probably, well, this is the winner basically that I will be looking for in terms of my next Camino Portuguese. And I know that they've made some advancements. From what I'm reading online in reviews, there are some pros and cons to their advancements. And there is another version of this Olympus out there as well that I might even try. But we'll see. There's a whole thing about, and I'm really not superstitious, but I kind of go with, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is what served me well previously, so why not continue on? And I've seen a number of people, I think even Efren from Walk with Efren, big Camino guy, walks tons of them, and this is his go-to as well. So again, big toe box, as far as giving you your feet space. It has a Vibram sole. So that is, some great structure there. And as far as the heel cup, fantastic in terms of a little bit more support, more so than the Lone Peak. And then the only caveat to that is where it wore was back here. And I'll show it here, and maybe a little side split. I've got some other video that I took, some B-roll of this particular shoe. And over time, this kind of rubbed, not enough to give me a blister, mind you, but enough that it was noticeable and I could feel it, but it wasn't, completely uncomfortable. Interesting point, and I think I mentioned this before, only got one blister on the whole Camino. And, knock on wood, thanks so much, for whatever I did. But I mean, I switched socks for one 30K day and away from the Smart Wool, and I went with a generic merino wool pair of socks from Decathlon because we happened to be there in Pamplona, and wore those, and sure enough got a blister and had to do the compete and the whole thing. But and then switched back to my Smart Wool, and there was no issue. And I credit that to being a half size bigger. I'm 11 typically, this is 11 and a half, and with a lot of space up in the toe so that I can move around, right? And then just not slipping. I did the heel lock. It's not done here right now, but I did the heel lock to make sure that it was all good. Another great thing about this is that they dry quickly. For those that and people are going to have their opinions about shoes, it's up to you which way you want to go. Quite simply, I'm not a fan of Gore-Tex or waterproof. And I don't have any experience with that, mind you, but all I hear from reviews about that is Gore-Tex or waterproof, well, yes, they work hard to keep the water out. They're really causing like an area of warmth and heat and friction on the inside of the shoe, could be. But I mean, like, then, as the shoe gets wet, it still has to dry out, and it takes longer to dry out for that matter. So while, it's keeping water out, it's keeping moisture in, from what I understand. The great thing about these shoes is, like, it's perforated, it's got a lot of mesh, and quite literally when I was walking, there was one instance where I foot down, full ankle deep in a soaker, and my whole shoe was soaked, and I still had probably 12 kilometers to go, and it was a day like today, and just kept walking, and eventually just dried out before I even got to my destination. And the fantastic thing about that is, even if you had a wet day and you just got rained on all day, I would, old skiing trick, get to where you're going, and you'd be hard pressed to find newspapers in some of the small towns you'll be stopping in, but if you can, shove a bunch of newspaper in the shoe and stick it near one of the heaters that they got there. The newspaper will absorb a lot of the moisture in the shoe. And, you know, before you do that, I would also take out the insole, like, because the insole is removable and it's going to hold a lot of moisture as well, right? So you got that here. So sorry about how grungy that looks, but yeah. So, I mean, take that out, put it on top of the heater, let it dry, throw some newspaper in there if you can. But I mean, these are great without going the waterproof route or the Gore-Tex route. And I believe those shoes, because of that material, they add more weight. They are longer to dry. It's just overall not my recommendation. This would be my recommendation as far as a walking shoe, a trail runner. This is what I have experience with. This would be my strong suggestion, but my opinion only. You know, use what works for you. A friend who came and met me on the Camino, he went with Solomon. Like I said, my buddy Steve, who ended up having to get a couple pairs of shoes till he found something right, he went with these as well. Other people have used, I have seen Crocs, I have seen sandals, you know, those Teva sandals, I've seen barefoot. There's been all kinds of stuff. So whatever works for you is going to be best, right? And try out different things. And like I said, go to a proper shoe store. More often than not, they will allow you to take the shoes with some sort of return policy, provided you're not out walking around and getting them dirty or whatnot. But if you have access to a treadmill, if you can go to your local community center and find an indoor track and give it a couple laps just to see how it feels. Are there any hot spots? Do the heel lock just to see if you're slipping. You know, try them out and see. And then if it's not for you, you know, any good shoe store will take that back and work with you to get you into the right pair. So that is the Altra Olympus 5. I'll be looking at a new pair. Again, apologies for the roughness of that guy, but he's my grass cutting shoe now. All right, next one. All right, next we have OnCloud shoes. Now, I love this brand. This is probably my fourth or fifth of this brand. This being my particular favorite. This was the Cloud Flow 3 in an 11 and a half. And this was actually on sale over here at Backroads, and I got lucky. And man, what a comfortable shoe. I still wear this, even though it's a bit worse for wear. It's kind of worn down in the sole. I actually took this recently on our trip to Portugal. My wife and I were in Portugal last October in 2025, and we got to see the cathedral. We got to go to the area where I'll be starting the Camino Portuguese from, and did a bit of the walking through the town down to the River Duo and a little ways along it. So got to walk a bit of it, which was kind of cool. I already got my credential, and I'll post that as well. But anyway, back to the shoe. So this is a shoe I still wear. It is very light, very comfortable. The thing about OnCloud, and sorry, this is the Cloud Flow 3. Can't find it anymore. They've actually discontinued the Cloud Flow. They've gone on to Cloud Monster and Cloud this and Cloud that, which is fine. They have many different makes. They even have Gore-Tex and waterproof and trail runners. So, but my stepdaughter uses these. She's on her feet all the day, and she's a manager of a bar restaurant. So she swears by them as well. And lots of other people I recommended them too also. It's not a trail runner, and I've not tried their trail runner. I think I picked it up. It's got some weight to it. And again, I'm going to go with what I know in terms of the Ultra. But this, what I found, and it just kind of struck me one day. I was just, wearing this quite a bit in my previous life, my previous job, another version of this. And I was just like, I have no foot pain whatsoever. There is no foot fatigue. I could finish a day on my feet for 10 hours and be ready for some more and go walking in these shoes. I walked all over Portugal in them, cobblestone roads, some of the path, and still very comfortable despite, having worn away a lot of the sole and, a lot of the cushion to it or whatnot. But I mean, man, I still clean these up with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and get out there with them because they're a super comfortable shoe. So while it's not the shoe I'd recommend for a Camino, you certainly could train in something like this. And I bring it up because footwear is important, right? And if you're going to do indoor or outdoor training, why not be in something that is going to be super comfortable for you? And who knows, you might fall in love with OnCloud as well and go with their trail runner. Or find something that works for you, even if you're doing the last 100 kilometers of a Camino and you're only going to be out there for 4 or 5 days because you're taking a week's vacation. Again, shoe choice is really going to be so personal to you. What's going on with your foot? Do you have, wide feet? Do you have high arches, no arches? Like whatever's happening, whatever they can recommend, is basically what you should go with. I would highly recommend going to somewhere where they can do that foot imprint and figure out, where your pressure points are. Are you pronating? Are you anti-pronating? all the stuff that a lot of these folks know that they're really skilled in and that can help you out, and they can make some recommendations. There's still New Balance. There's, like I said, Hoka. There are Solomon's. There are Sauconys, Asics. There, and then you get the Merrells. You get all kinds of different hiking boots that are out there, and people swear by what they choose. And I have a gentleman, Jim, again, shout out. He goes by Brooks, one particular kind of Brooks, and he'll buy 2 of them at a time, I think. So, if I could, I would have, and I've searched for this particular shoe just for the simple non-Camino usage, but man, what a great shoe. But again, it's so very personal. Don't, take my word for it as you need to wear an Altra Olympus, because again, like I said before, some people have had difficulty with the Altra Zero Drop and it being that kind of footfall. But let's finish on this shoe and I'll kind of wrap up very soon. All right, so the OnCloud Cloud Flow, fantastic shoe. Try some OnClouds if you will. And they're an investment, but they're a very good shoe. All right, next one. Okay, so this is what I was talking about as far as your downtime shoe. They're a recovery slide. So I remembered what I was trying to think about before. This is a Hoka recovery slide. And what this is basically, you're done with your day. You're done with your trail running or hiking or your Camino day of 22, 25, 27, 35 kilometers. And you just need something to get out of those shoes, get out of the socks, and put on maybe, a different pair of fresh socks and just walk around town because you're looking for, a place to go have your menu del dia. So this is what I used. And this was simply slid into two of the outside pouches on my backpack. And, that's what I went with. And, they had their pros and cons to them. Absolutely. It's, great foam. It's pliable somewhat. This was really good in terms of, areas where you didn't want to be barefoot. But then if you wanted to cool off in some of the creeks or whatnot, you could just walk right in. And because they're rubber, right, and when you carry, you just dry them off and throw them back in your bag. I never had them inside my bag, typically on the pouches on the outside. But yeah, I just would walk right into a creek, cool off the feet. It was wonderful. Except, when you take that wrong step and your sandal slips that way, that was really awkward. Almost fell on my ass in the river. But yeah, so I used that. And the only other caveat I would say is, and I'll show you an image of where it happened. I was in Santiago. We had finished the Camino. We were, downtime there, and we were going to go to Mass. And we heard that, and it's a very big deal to go to Mass, and they swing the Botafumerio, which is the large incense that they have on the rope. If you haven't seen it, I'll throw a video in there, and it is just spectacular to witness. They don't always do it either. So it's something that to behold. And when you hear that it's going to happen, it's kind of rumored. There was talk about basically it's, a major donation that gets them to actually use it. But it is, and if you've seen the movie The Way, you've probably seen it swinging, but I've got video of it. It was just, man, it brought tears to my eyes. But when we heard about that was going down and we were moments away or minutes away from getting to Mass, and I was wearing these with socks, we're kind of going and wanted to get to church pretty quickly because it was going to fill up. And as I was going down the stairs, the literal stairs that you come in from the Camino Francés, when you pass by the Piper and get down the stairs, there was a grate that I wasn't paying attention to, a circular sewage grate that has the concrete around it dipping into it. And lo and behold, I took a step and I went and stepped and went like this. And for whatever reason, my hands were in my pockets, and I have the habit of, I had euros in change in my hand, and I stepped and I was falling and my hands went flying out, and all this change went everywhere in front of all these people. I was so embarrassed. And my buddy was there. He was helping me up. I took a real spill, and people were collecting my money and bringing it over to me to see if I was okay. And I had wrenched my ankle. I turned it right over. It didn't feel like it was really bad at the onset, and we were still wanting to get to Mass. So we get to Mass, we're standing room only, we're standing there through Mass, we go off to dinner, we're seated for an hour and a half, a bit of vino, a couple of drinks later, then I go to get up to walk back to my hotel, and there it was. I was in some pain. I had managed to sprain my ankle on probably day 36 after having done all of the Camino, all those jagged rocks, all those climbs, all those unfamiliar footfalls. Everything was fine through all that, but here I am in Santiago, and simple walk with these guys, and a grate threw me out. I put some ice on it. I rested. I elevated. I was, back. I still had a couple of days in Santiago de Compostela, and I was okay in another day and a half. And good thing I wasn't planning on going to Finisterre right away. But yeah, I mean, just be careful. Watch out for that grate when you're coming through, and choose your footwear wisely. That's the whole point of this video. Is while I have my recommendations for you in terms of what may or may not be good for you, it's going to be personal choice. Yes, my strong suggestion is, say, an Altra shoe and perhaps an Altra Olympus. But remember, what works for me may not work for you. I've actually heard about the Altra, if not phased in properly with your other shoes, exacerbating someone's foot pain or trouble that they're having, or it just doesn't work for them. And you don't want to be out, because shoes are an investment, a couple $100 every time, right? So take my advice, find a reputable shoe store, do some internal walk or indoor track walking, or treadmill walking. So if you have to return them, then and phase them in with your other shoes. And if you have to return them, then it's no harm, no foul until you find what works for you. And just get out there, and like today we did our 10 kilometers. I found out that the Cliftons may or may not be the best training shoe for me. I'll probably get back to Ultra, and I'll probably have to phase into wearing an Ultra again because it's been a minute. So long story short, that's kind of it. I hope this was educational in some way, shape, or form in terms of anybody that is looking to, get out there and walk the Camino, and especially for somebody that's, in their 50s and, has had, the odd foot issue or a bit of knee pain or carrying a bit of extra weight, right? You want to make sure that you're choosing your shoes properly. And, if there's anything that you have in terms of questions or comments, please, throw them in below and let me know, in terms of any other topics you'd like to discuss or questions in terms of footwear. One last piece, socks are super important. I'll probably do a whole thing on socks. I brought 3 pairs. I brought 2, which were regular for my shoes for every day, aside from that pair I bought at Decathlon, which was foolish of me. 2 that I wore, and then this actual red pair was the downtime shoe for my recovery slide, which meant a whole world of difference for me to get out of what was a more or less a thin kind of sock that I was using on the day-to-day because it was warmer weather, to get into something that's a bit more cushioned. And prior to putting on the sock, I found a pilgrim store or an outdoor store on the way that had like a peppermint foot lotion. May sound silly, but rubbing your feet down and throwing on a sock and then just kind of having your slide and going out and finding dinner, man, it was like some recovery for my feet, and it worked for me for every day going forward. So I just kept that routine going. And maybe that was part of the reason why I didn't encounter any blisters. Who knows? But like I said, I mean, that's just what worked for me. What works for you may be a bit different. That's my advice. If you have any questions, let me know. And whatever you pick, be careful out there, and buen camino.